Yo, what's up everyone? This is Ellis, and today I thought we'd go through a track that has been requested a lot of times on Instagram and stuff. So we're going to run through Feel That Way. It was released on Monster Cat in, I think, March. I think there's some really cool things to show you in this track. So let's dive in. So this is the project, nice and colourful. The idea kind of started down here, which I've bounced out from a very old project. So I'll play you that first. So it's really, really empty. And then it kind of has this build. The vocal idea popped into my head. That was the first thing that came down. Laid down that like Reese type bass and that ARP. Originally I wanted to go for this triplet vibe straight away. But anyway, in the end I thought, this drop is just not sitting right in the track. So I just got rid of it completely and started from scratch on the drop. The main thing that kind of kept consistent in the track is this ARP like melody idea, which sounds like this. That is what I built the track around itself originally, and we kind of moved to this instrument. So what this is 3 layers, a Logic preset called Realistic Marimba, just with a bit of OTT, some delay, some reverb on it. Then we've got this contact layer here. This is a preset in Contact. It's the Celesta preset, which is a really cool metallic organic type noise, which went really well with this. Same effects chain on it. This one's an octave higher. And then we've got another Contact preset, which is the kalimba. So all these sounds I think come from the world section in the factory library in Contact. This one has a bit of sample delay, which is just spreading it to the sides. And that's your main little ARP thing. There's also a bit of transient master on here, which is boosting the attack, so it's just a bit more clicky. There's a volume shaper for side chaining, again probably for automation, and another side chain. This ARP then gets layered even more here. So this is from the Tal synth, I believe, which I don't have, so I had to bounce it down so that I didn't get any white noise. Producer hack for you. And then we've got this other one which also came from the Tal. It's this tuned white noise sort of thing. So I think let's dive straight into the drop now, because that is where all the cool stuff's happening, and then I'll explain a little bit about the verse and how the song kind of developed afterwards. The main drop section consists of 3 main ideas. So you've got the bass, the chords, and the lead, and they're all kind of playing off each other, which really works with this triplet kind of feel. And it's kind of a weird groove to play around with. It took me a while to kind of get used to it, but yeah, it's super fun. What I actually started with before, when I moved into this new drop, was the bass line, I believe, which is here. This bass is actually mainly more of a sub bass than it is kind of a mid bass, and that is because the chords, which I'll show you in a minute, cover a lot of that low mid range. So the sub bass itself sounds like this, and that is a Serum preset. It is just a saw wave that's kind of been filtered down, and then we're using the CLA bass plugin on it, which is just compressing it and adding a bit of the low sub frequencies. This main sidechain here is just acting as a standard sidechain to get everything out of the way of the kick drum. And this one here is a preset I created a while ago, and it's basically just mirroring what's happening on the front end, but also on the back end. And what that does is it kind of cuts the sound off a little bit earlier. So it's almost like using a tremolo, I guess. The next layer, I kind of felt that this sub layer, even though there is kind of like a mid bass within the chord preset, it still wasn't cutting through enough. So I used this massive preset which I created, and I created it a while ago now, called Funkerman Bass, which is I tried to recreate this sound from an old Funkerman tune. That sounds like this. So that's playing the 5th, I believe, or the 3rd, I'm not sure, I can't remember, of the bass. So it's not actually playing the same notes. Again, kind of really similar processing on as the sub bass. Then we've got these extra layers that kind of just come in and out and fill up those gaps. And here I'm using these slap basses, which I sampled myself, and they're actually slap bass mute. So when you would mute the string on your bass, you get this kind of ghost sound. So they act as ghost notes basically. And then there's these other little sounds like this 808 tom here, this bass shot which accentuates the first hit of the drop, and another bass shot which is doing the same thing. We've also got this plucky bass which has more of a triplet rhythm to it. And that just helps with the groove itself. Moving on to the chords. So the chords here are 4 layers. And I also don't have Spire. I still have the demo of Spire. I've just never got round to buying it. So I have to deal with the whole white noise thing, which is why this is bounced down. The main preset was just a saw wave, and it had a filter on it, and I think a little bit of EQ, just boosting the high end. And here I'm just automating this reverb up in the gaps. This reverb, Silververb, has this kind of weird grainy tone to it, which worked really well in this song. Then I moved on to this square stab layer, which is a Serum preset, and it's a square wave as opposed to a saw wave. Little bit of filtering going on, some sidechain, and a chorus which basically is just spreading it out. Those two together sound like this. There is also a top layer which is covering that super top high end. It probably has quite a bit of noise on it just to help it punch through. This one also has a chorus on. Then there's this cool little stab layer here, and what this is doing is it's kind of following this plucky bass down here. So this is when these first 3 notes play straight on the kick drum, and then you have a little bit that kind of plays off the kick drum, and it gives you that proper triplet feel. What I felt was really missing in the original version I had, because it just felt a bit too static. So these chords are just ES2 simple saw wave filtered chords which sound like this. They just really give you that groove, like I've said 5 times. So let's move on to the lead sound, which I think is probably the most interesting part of this track, and there's a lot of cool little things I can show you. The main lead sound itself is built in ES2. This sounds like this by itself. What is giving the sound this character is we've got one voice of unison which just spreads it to the sides a bit, and there's this distortion in ES2 I love. If you kind of put it on soft mode and then crank it all the way up, you get this nice soft clipping sort of sound. There's also a pitch modulation on LFO1, which is a really fast LFO. If I slow it down, you'll hear what I mean. can turn it up. It starts to become kind of untonal. And what this is doing, it just gives the sound a little bit more character than just a plain old saw wave. Processing wise, I started with a simple channel EQ, which is just getting rid of this low end down here, which you don't need, and some of this muddiness in the like 200 hertz range. Then we've got some OTT, which is just bringing that sound out and just compressing it a little bit. There's a bit crusher, which only has 14% on it. We've got a FabFilter Saturn, which is just saturating a little bit of these bands here. That just gave the sound a little bit more high end. We've got a reverb, which is super short. Just gives the sound a little bit of space. Another reverb, which is being used to automate in the gaps. We've got a gain, which is also accentuating the reverb swells. This is also being used for automation. This is really cool. I saw people like Zonderling do this quite a lot. It kind of just makes the super simple analogy sounds like a saw wave sound really interesting and less boring when you add these automations in there. So you can hear that delay coming in and out there. Got another EQ, which is kind of just taming everything that was added. Got another EQ, which is removing even more peaks. So there's a lot of EQ in to shape the sound, I think, because it was one that was pretty harsh. And to be honest, on its own, if I played it to you, it's still pretty harsh. But when it sits in the mix, it works. And then we've got a sidechain just to do the usual. This is a cool little trick. The lead's being sent to this bus right here, only a little bit by -26. And this is basically a replica of this original sound, so I've just soloed it for you. And what I'm doing here is I'm ring shifting the hell out of this signal, so you get this really wobbly alien like sound. And that when you kind of have it on its own, or you just stick it straight on this chain, it's just too much. So hence why I sent it to a bus and I got rid of all of that low end that you absolutely don't need, and just spread it out with the chorus so that there's no like phasing or anything going on there. I then bounce that lead down and we go to this. So the reason why I bounce the lead out is because I'm then adding this Soothe plugin to it. Soothe is this really crazy plugin that I've seen a lot of people using recently, and it just kind of de-harshes anything. But the reason why I bounced it out is because when I added Soothe to this channel strip, there was this kind of weird latency on there. So Soothe, when you like increase this band here, it actually reduces it rather than boosting it, which you might think. And it's this really harsh range here. Was no matter how much I EQ'd the sound, it was, you know, I could take out all of that area, but it would just lose the sound's power. So Soothe just really sorted that out. I'm not 100% sure how it works, but it's a crazy plugin. So because the lead melody is so simple, it's just kind of based on 2 notes. I did use a lot of automation, so we did have the delay in there, which I've showed you, but we've also automated the release of the ES2 synth. It just kind of sounds like it's slowly getting lazier and longer, and then it tightens up right at the end again. Okay, so let's move on to the drums and the effects. Standard kick and clap, and then on top of that kick and clap, we have these hi-hats and other layers. So because the track is so boom, 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 and there's not really much kind of in between other than the odd triplet note, these hats really help fill up that frequency spectrum that you're kind of missing out on. So I usually kind of would use just this standard kick and snare type thing here, which is one that I use in a lot of songs, but I did add these extra layers on. There's this one here, which is actually kind of a kick layer more than a snare layer, so I'm just getting rid of all the low end there. And a little trick is, if you want to layer like hats and stuff on top of your kicks without losing the punch of your kick, is put on a really small side chain. So I have this preset here called hats, which I use, and it's just you can barely hear the difference. You can hear that transient on the kick there, and if I put it on, it just softens that transient. There are other ways of doing that, but that's just the way I choose to do it. This other hat, this backup snare, so this snare was just adding a little bit more weight and body to the original snare. This one's being side chained as well, the same way. There's also this bigger hat here, which just helps that first beat have more power. There's some really nice little effects and fills in this drop too, which I'll show you now. So there's this really cool one that comes in at the end of the first few bars, I think, and it's really like choppy. The second half of the drop is not too dissimilar from the first half. What mainly is introduced is kind of like some percussion grooves, and there's this really cool stuttery little, what I call, booky vocal. So this booky vocal sounds like this without anything on it. This, me and my friend Sam recorded these. We just stacked a bunch of layers together, and this was recorded in another project where we recorded all of the vocals. It just sounded really nice in the second half of the drop. But to give it more groove and kind of fit in with the rest of the percussion and stuff that was going on, what I did was added this tremolo here, which is an 8th triplet note. There's also two soothes on there, two soothes, which are just taming some of the harsher frequencies. So the percussion that comes in here, we've got some live shakers, we've got these hi-hats, we've got some more drums somewhere, we've got these rim grooves and these acoustic hi-hat grooves. There's also a ride, which is on top of the kick. There's also this scary flute sample, which was made in Serum. It's kind of like a super distorted sound, which had a reverb on when it was also run through the distortion, which kind of gives this massive atmospheric vibe. This is also being run through that tremolo that the vocal was being run through. Okay, so I thought I'd show you guys the verses, which are kind of a big juxtaposition to the drop itself. It's more acoustic, live, more chilled out. So a little bit of background about the verse. So I had this kind of basic I don't want to feel that way lyric vibe down already, but I didn't know how to kind of incorporate more of a melody and more of the rest of the lyrics in there. So my friend Sam helped me write the verses. So there's some cool lyrical references in here that he'll probably want me to mention. The whole vibe of this track, we kind of got this 80s synthwave Stranger Things vibe, especially from the ARP idea. In the vocal, we have this lyric.
We've been turning upside down, now things are stranger.
We've been turning upside down, now things are stranger. If you get that reference, then, well, if you know, you know. The verse is kind of consistent of a few things. We've got like a live bass, a synth bass, a bunch of guitars, and some keys, and then a bunch of atmospheric kind of sound. So it started with this Rhodes right here. just super soft.
Seems right.
So the Rhodes and the ARP kind of play off each other, and then we have these little percussion sounds. Just nice, Foley, organic sounds.
Go for too long. Go back, I never could. It wasn't what I was searching for.
And then when the song kind of starts to pick up and build in dynamically, there's a few things that are introduced. So this live bass, which is what I played on my Fender, just super simple. There's also a synth bass which is being layered on top of that, which I just got rid of the low end from. This was also from the original demo, this sound. There's this funky, like plucky staccato guitar which I recorded in. It goes to that super nice note there. And then we have this acoustic guitar which my friend Louis played in. Kind of reminds me of like folk or country music. There's also some strings which are increasing in volume to kind of increase the tension. These are from Contact. And then there is these little ARP sounds which really fill up the space in the track and make it feel so atmospheric and wide. These are recorded on the Yamaha CP and they sound like this. One's hard left, one's hard right, and they're both playing different melodies. There's then this, what I called a Buki cola pad, because it sounds like the pad from cola. That little bend there. There's a string drone, some more bells, which are also played on the Yamaha CP. Another trick to kind of make the track feel like it's increasing in tension and it's building is to layer your vocals in a certain way. So what we did here is we kind of kept the first half of the first verse just mono, just one layer. There's not really much processing on it.
Seems right, it never was.
There's a bit of delay, a little bit of reverb.
Time shows, we let it go.
But in the second half, when you really want people to kind of listen to the lyrics and feel like the track is going somewhere, we have like one center lead, which is almost the same as this one here. Two doubles, so one hard left, one hard right. We have two falsetto ones, which Samsung, which are also hard left, hard right. We have one lead, which is an octave lower, and the occasional harmony. So then you get this sound.
We've been turning upside
you can really feel that transition.
Stranger, nothing's left to say. Too far gone to go back to that place. And I don't wanna feel that.
Moving on to verse 2. Here the idea was kind of to just keep the groove going, keep the rhythm going, but reintroduce that vocal phrase with kind of combining now that acoustic, more laid back vibe with the electronic vibe. The beat just kind of continues going with less effects and layers that are in the drop. So the kick and clap are the same. There's these choppy hats which are introduced. So they sound like this without any processing. Like these acoustic hats. Stuck a transient master on there, just kind of decreasing the attack a little bit because they were quite choppy, and the sustain completely. Then an envelope which is just tightening up the sound completely. The main thing here is this sound shifter, which is a pitch plugin by Waves. The pitch is just being automated up and down. The bass and stuff in the first verse was a little bit too slow to kind of bring back into the second verse, so I added in more of a plucky bass which has a lot more movement to it here. So there's this bass, which is this 808 type thing, which I made in Serum. There's this top layer which has really got this pluck to it. There's also this pad, which is a preset in Serum. There's also this really cool little fill, which is one of my favourite parts of this verse.
Time shows we let it go for too long.
So I sampled this from another track of mine. It's just a bunch of random samples put together, but it sounds really cool if you get them in the right order and in the right. If you choose the right samples that go well together, you get this really interesting fill.
Go back, I never could. It wasn't what I was searching.
Second half of the verse, it keeps building again. This other synth layer is introduced. It's just rising in pitch throughout, playing the same rhythm as the chords are. These ones are also introduced. And then you go into this super 80s, super Stranger Things type section. It's almost like a little breakdown. So this bit here is what really gives me that 80s vibe. And yeah, that's pretty much the track. I hope you guys learned something again from this video. I really enjoy making these, so please let me know in the comments if there's anything else you want to see, or any challenges you want me to do, anything. Just drop a comment below or drop me an Instagram DM. So stay safe, wash your hands, and get producing.